Hello, world. So, today we are going to get into quite a bit. We are going to be discussing the rampant sexual abuse that's been happening in public schools that nobody seems to want to talk about, but it is a massive problem, rest assured. We are also going to be discussing New York's epidemic of crime. They just can't get it together. There seems to be incident after incident. So I want to get into that. And we will conclude this stream by going over the homosexual couple that is um, fighting for their right to other women's bodies. And I do, real quick, want to discuss this Candace Owens situation that's happening on Twitter. So we will get into it today. All right. Welcome to RCAM. I'm your host, Ryan, and thank you for tuning in today. So, I want to start off this stream by covering this tweet of mine that is going, I guess, getting a little bit of traction on Twitter. So, I was on Facebook, and I don't really go on Facebook that often, but I decided to scroll through Facebook briefly, and I saw that Candace Owens had posted a status update, so I checked it out, and she was talking about this new service called Minect that she's using, and in a way for people to send her text messages and get video calls and basically connect with her. I thought, oh, that sounds pretty cool. You know, I clicked and kind of went through the website, and as I was scrolling through this website, though, I noticed something. Something that caught my eye. So I'll show you the screenshots real quick. So, window capture. Give me 1 second. All right, here it is. All right. So this is one of the screenshots I took, and then I went here and noticed the pricing. So, $150 for a text message, which I wouldn't pay that much, but I think that's reasonably priced. $400 for a video message, and then $5,000 per minute for a video call. And I saw that, I was like, this is insane. Like, that is crazy town. $75,000 per minute. So I shared this on Twitter, and I said, I like Candace, but there's no way, and I do. She's great. There's no way I would pay anyone $5K per minute to speak with them. She has a 15-minute minimum, which means that 15-minute convo is going to run you a meager $75,000. That's insane. So I had posted this, and obviously it's gotten shared quite a bit, and people are obviously talking about the obscenely high price that it costs to talk to her. And it is high, and in my opinion, way too high. So this started making the rounds, and I actually received a message from Candace Owens, and she clarified and basically stated that that she had made a mistake when she was filling out these forms and didn't really notice the per minute part. So she should be updating it. I think she's already made some updates already. So I think we can go to the site real quick and see some of those updates. So this is the site, this is the page, and she has made some updates. I mean, it's 1,500 per minute right now. I do think it will probably get reduced. Hey, Kai, how are you doing? I'm seeing your chat on my screen. That's awesome. So I do think she meant, at least from what she has stated, that it's supposed to be 5,000 for 15 minutes. And obviously that's out of the price range of still a lot of people, but coming down from $75,000, that's not that bad. And she's really nice too, actually. So she's very friendly. So positive interaction overall. Issue a full retractment on my original statement because she did offer clarity, and I respect that. She took the time to reach out to me. She didn't have to, and she set the record straight. So I want to do the same. I want to extend to her the same courtesy. So there you have it. You can connect with her on Connect, and yeah, that's it. So let's get into this next story. So I I have been talking about this for quite some time, and it's the problem of sexual abuse in public schools, which not a lot of people talk about. I think the only mainstream person I've heard really talk about this issue has been Matt Walsh, and that's how I'm aware of it. I would not be aware this is an issue if Matt Walsh never reported on it. But he did report on it several years ago. He kind of gives an update every single year, and and that's kind of what resurfaced this situation to my attention. So the level of scandal that is happening in the public education system is unlike anything you could ever possibly imagine. A lot of people love to talk about the Catholic Church and the sex scandal that happened there. This pales into comparison because we are talking about millions of children being subject to sexual misconduct. Millions. At least 5 million. So, yeah, this is a crazy issue, and I want to read from his report. But first, Cly writes, I don't support everything Matt Walsh says, but I agree on exposing this issue. Yeah, it's a massive problem. If you put into perspective, because he'll ultimately pull from a case study that was done by the government, and they uncovered, this is, I believe, going back to 2000, at least the case study I have is from 2017, but I think they started this study earlier. They deduced that 1 in 10 kids from kindergarten through 12th grade will be the victims of sexual misconduct by either their peers or the staff working in the schools. That number is jarring. Absolutely jarring. If you have 10 kids in your class, and usually most classrooms have 30 kids, at least 3 of those kids that walk into that classroom are going to be abused in some sort of way. That should be deeply, deeply unsettling to parents that have their kids in the public school system, which is one of the reasons I don't. I do not have my kid in the public school system because that's, though 10% is far too high of a chance for me to take with my daughters. So I will not be taking that chance. I will not be putting my kid through the public education system because that is just one of many problems with the public education system, which is, I can go off on a whole tangent about that in and of itself. But for now, I want to kind of stay focused on this issue with the public schools. So this is an article by Matt Walsh by the Daily Wire. So he says, it's always kind of interesting to notice what kind of data the government tracks and what kind of data gets completely ignored. Every couple of years, for example, we get something called the National Climate Assessment. Yes, they can spend time assessing the state of the climate, but they can't spend time exploring and investigating the rampant sexual abuse that's happening in public schools. They have time for this, but they don't have time for that. And I think that's what some of the point he's going to make. If the sea levels rise by a millimeter off Oregon coast, you'll know about it. We also receive regular government reports on the numbers of women who decide to take STEM classes and the popularity of non-binary and pansexual gender identities in places like Honduras. Another thing that's just alarming just about this short little bit that we read is just how much money the government wastes on retarded studies. Just stop wasting our money and spend it on things that really matter. Like, I don't know, the well-being of our children seems pretty significant to me. What we haven't received for 2 decades is a comprehensive update from the government on the number of children who are sexually abused in public schools. It was all the way back in 2004 that the Department of Education released a report finding that between kindergarten and 12th grade, 9.6, nearly 10% of students nationwide were subjected to sexual misconduct by school employees. That is 1 in 10 students, totaling more than 5 million child victims in the system at any given moment. Teachers, coaches, and bus drivers were the most common offenders. That's chilling. I don't think a lot of people understand how widespread this problem is. 5 million. That number is astronomical. That number should actually scare your average parent. A finding like that should have led to a national outcry and immediate changes, and indeed, the Department of Education's report recommended several new policies for screening employees and standardizing policies to make these kinds of incidents easier to report and keep track of. But that never happened, and the federal government has barely shown any interest in the topic in the 20 years since. There certainly was no broader cultural reaction to the Department of Education's report either, and that's a big contrast to other scandals involving systemic sexual abuse. A decade ago, a popular film called Spotlight dramatized the work of investigative journalists at the Boston Globe. The journalists discovered a cover-up of child sex abuse in the Catholic Church, and they won a Pulitzer. And he's right. They spent a lot of time, and rightfully so, reporting on the sexual abuse scandal that was happening in the Catholic Church, and they should have. And then he goes on to discuss kind of the Me Too movement and these Hollywood perverts getting exposed for the sexual abuse scandals happening there. But nothing about the rampant sexual abuse happening in schools. So he goes on to kind of share an example of this from earlier this week. So we're going to play this video real quick.
Hudson, Wisconsin, accused of kissing and exchanging secret messages with one of her students. Let's check in right now with Audrey Russo, who's in Hudson Live right now. Audrey.
Jason, I spent the overnight hours combing through the most recent court filing, and here's what I found. Right now, 24-year-old Madison Bergman is out of jail. She's out on a $25,000 signature bond. She's charged with first-degree child sex assault. Now, here's how we got to this point. Police say that Bergman's abuse of this fifth-grade student came to light really just in a matter of days. The male victim's parents found text messages between him and Bergman on Monday morning. Then on Wednesday, the parents brought those texts to Rivercrest Elementary School administrators. Those texts include conversations about the two kissing, touching, making out. Bergman was questioned on Wednesday. She told investigators she was given the child's phone number after a trip to Afton Alps with the child's family. She was then placed under arrest.
Yeah, she shouldn't have gotten out of jail. That's for dang sure. But you want to know something that I find peculiar? I think these incidences largely go unnoticed and nobody talks about it, not because it's just happening in the public school system, but because a lot of the perpetrators are unfortunately women. I'm not saying all of them, but definitely a handful. And I want you to notice something. Hold on, this real quick. I want to pull up a different story. All right. So, because they don't use a specific wording. And so this is from a post a while back from the New York Post. And they're typically, the headlines read this way: teacher molests 15-year-old boy in the car, was worried she wouldn't be his first in court documents. So you get these over and over again. What they don't say is rape. And usually they'll word these cases that involve female teachers as teacher slept with student, teacher had sex with student. They will deliver the headline in a passive way and not explicitly state what these teachers are in fact doing. They are raping these kids. If you can't, the age of consent in most states, I believe, is 17, and below that, kids cannot consent to sex, and we call that rape. So these teachers are raping these kids. These women, and I'm sure there's a handful of men too, are involved in taking advantage of students, and it's horrible. Um, so back to the story that we were covering before, there's another one where there's a teacher engaged in an improper relationship between her and her student. An eighth grade teacher who appears old enough to be a grandmother was allegedly propositioning children for sex using Instagram direct messages. So it's just one after the other. And I see basically one of these stories every week. And I'm not looking for them. They just appear on my feed. And, it makes it definitely leads me to believe the stats are true when it comes to these cases of sexual misconduct. And here's the study that I believe Matt was pulling from. So an estimated 10% of students of K through 12 will experience sexual misconduct by a school employee by the time they graduate from high school. Such conduct can result in lifelong consequences for students, including negative physical, psychological, and academic outcomes. To prevent incidents from occurring, school districts are tasked with complying with Title X, a federal law that provides guidelines for prevention efforts and responses to school employee sexual misconduct in K through 12 schools. And they address the stats here, according to 2004. So we're going back 10 years. The Department of Education report an estimated 1 in 10 students will experience school sexual misconduct by the time they graduate from high school. That's 10 years ago. Imagine what it is now. I don't expect that it has gotten any better as our society has become more degenerate. I don't. And it doesn't seem like they're consistent in keeping up with this and doing a damn thing about it. Which is why we need to constantly bring this to their attention. We need to remind the public that the abuse happening in the schools is something that is happening at a scale that is just horrifying. We would not feel comfortable taking these types of chances if we really understood. And again, I just want to bring it back. If your kid is going into the public school system and the average class is 30 kids, three of them are going to be abused. I look at my daughter, she goes to a hybrid homeschool co-op. So it's a Christian school. And I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't happen there, but I do think her school is pretty solid. But, she has 10 kids in her class, so it's like the chances of it being your kid are pretty high. They're pretty high. So it's something that I really do challenge parents to think about. And, this to me is like an advertisement for homeschooling. If you are in a position where you can homeschool your students, do it. Absolutely do it. Not only will you protect them from these perverts, but you'll also protect them from the indoctrination that happens. You'll protect them from the possibility of, being the victims of a mass shooting. Although I do think that's unlikely. That's a bulletproof way to protect them by not putting them in this situation to begin with. And also, homeschooled kids actually fare better than public school kids. And I get that it's not, it's not feasible for everybody, but if there's something within your power to make it happen, try to make it happen. Right now, my wife and I, we're both working 2 jobs to make sure that our daughter can be in this hybrid program. So she's home 3 days, she goes to school 2 days, and there's a lot of programs like that. And there's a lot of flexibility in tailoring these programs to your schedule and your needs. So I think a lot of people think like homeschooling is just like the classroom setting and they have to sit down for 8 hours a day and do work. It's not like that. You do it at your leisure. And often, my daughter gets all of her work done in an hour, maybe 2 hours max. So she's working only 2 hours a day. So not bad. I imagine it'll get a little bit more difficult the older she gets, but right now, And she's able to do it. My wife's able to help her, and it's not overwhelming. My wife is the last person too that thought she would be a homeschool mom, let alone like it, and she loves it. So I 10 out of 10 recommend getting your kids in the public school system, or the homeschooling your kids and get them out of the public school system. All right. So the next story I want to talk about is about an incident that happened in New York City, that lovely dystopian hellhole that I escaped from. And it's not surprising to me as somebody that lived there. That place was going downhill hardcore when I was there. They started implementing that bail reform, and criminals were able to be released immediately, to the point where I spoke to state troopers and local police, just voicing overall discouragement about making arrests because they saw it as being pointless. And with the bail reform, it is pointless because these thugs end up right back out on the street to terrorize people again. To put it into perspective, I have two family members, two people that I know personally, that have been assaulted on the New York City subway system. Fortunately, both of them are okay and nothing serious, but they got put in very uncomfortable positions because these psychopaths are allowed back on the street and they don't suffer any repercussions for their insane and psychotic behavior. So I'm going to show you some footage from this video that's making the rounds. And this was shared by PPV Tahoe. So this is a video of in New York showing a man who snags a woman with a belt before dragging her behind a vehicle. It is disturbing, so viewer discretion advised. If this makes you uncomfortable, now is probably the time. Just tune out for a second. But I'm going to go ahead and just play this clip.
He goes, what? What? Touch. Vaya. Tiene pantalones blancos. He don't got no hat on, right? Está arrastrándola. Dragging her down the block.
So this man ends up dragging this woman behind here, and he violates this woman. And this the New York Post kind of goes into a little bit more details about this. He has his way with her, chokes her out. I do not think anybody has found him yet. He fled after the attack had happened and had not been caught by Thursday. And the NYPD's Special Victims Unit is looking into this sexual assault. And however, the victim has stopped cooperating with authorities. And this crime, I'm just going to read real briefly from this report. This heinous crime comes as the department's crime stats from April revealed that 6 more rapes were reported last month, 124 compared to April 2023, when the department fielded 118 such reports. So you have this epidemic of violence. It's not just sexual assault, it's just overall violence happening in New York City. And it's because these people are soft on crime. They do not enforce the law, and they let these criminals back on the street when they should be throwing them in prison. And for the rapists and the murderers, they should be sentencing them to death. That is my humble opinion. And you wouldn't even have to do it a lot. Make an example out of some of these people. Strike fear in the hearts of those who think about doing such a horrific act. And less crime will happen. Guaranteed. But when you don't punish violent crime, when you let perpetrators of violent crime back into the streets, then the results are devastating. I spoke recently about the man versus bear scenario, and unfortunately, when things like this are happening, women do have a reason to be afraid. When you're letting violent criminals back into the streets, I would not feel comfortable as a woman walking around in New York City where there are violent men on the loose and being enabled by the dystopian laws in New York. No, they need to be punished severely. Clay writes, amen, bro. Yeah, they do. They have to be punished. This is what happens when there is no judgment. Evil is emboldened. They do not take a day off. They see other people getting away with crimes and they decide, hey, you know what? If they're getting away with it, I'll just do it. What is going to deter them from doing crimes if they're going to get arrested and then be let right back out on the streets? Nothing. It just invites more crime. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see this. It should be obvious. And I know for a fact deterrence work. They without a doubt work. Do you want to know how I know this? When I was younger, I used to trespass. But I would not trespass on places that I knew had alarm systems because the alarm systems served as deterrents. So I'm not going to do my urban exploring in places that I know have alarms. It prevented the crime. So when you know that crime is going to be punished, you're much less likely to commit the crime. If you know that doing said action is going to result in your death, you are less likely to perform that action. Will it stop everybody? No. There will be some people that don't care about the repercussions, but there will be a lot of people who do. And they will not act on them. So all we need to do is make an example of a few of these people, just start executing people. You can call me cruel, you can call me callous. I think it's cruel and callous to let evil people have their way with innocent women. I think that's cruel. I don't think there's anything more evil than being apathetic toward wicked people who are doing wicked things to innocent people who did nothing wrong. No, you punish evil. You punish it swiftly. You don't wait 10 years to execute them. You do it pretty much immediately. You know, that's what you do. And I know some people, get squeamish over that. What about the innocent people? Well, that's why we have a legal system. We hope that innocent people will not be caught up in that, and you can't sentence somebody to death if people have reasonable doubt. So that should be resolved in the court system. And unfortunately, maybe there might be some innocent people that get caught up in that. I hope not. But if you don't punish crime, you are guaranteeing innocent people will suffer. Guaranteed. Because you let these violent criminals back out. And then it doesn't even make sense from like a financial perspective. Because if you sentence someone to life in prison, you're basically sentencing them to death. Why not just get it over with? They're going to die in the prison system anyway. Why use our resources to continue to feed them, clothe them, do all that? Like, why? If they're guilty of violent crime, why just get it over with? So, I think the way we solve this is by just enforcing the law and punishing criminals for doing evil and wicked things. Is that too much to ask? Punish crime? I don't know. It sounds wild. It sounds like a radical idea, but I think it'll work. All right. Next story. This one is disturbing in its own right. All right. So this was originally shared by Katie Faust. How does, she says in 2015, how does my gay marriage harm anyone else? 2024, failure to subsidize our lab-made motherless babies is discrimination. Wow, the irony. Everybody talked about, conservatives talked about the slippery slope. We talked about that. I remember making that argument. People thought I was crazy for it. They thought I was homophobic. How dare you? How dare you think that legalizing same-sex marriage is going to lead to, pedos and other horrific things. And I didn't even, at the time, transgenderism wasn't on my radar. I could never have imagined transgenderism would be a thing. When I talked about the slippery slope in when same-sex marriage was legalized, I thought we would go kind of right into pedophilia. I thought that's what would happen, and it kind of is happening in different ways. But we also went into transgenderism, and now we're going into basically human trafficking and homosexuals fighting for the right to women's wombs. So what people don't understand here is that these two men, if they think they have a right to a child, if they think they have a right to IVF benefits, they think they have a right to a woman's body. How dystopian is that? That's crazy. Let's read this story. All right. Gay couple sues New York leaders over denial of IVF benefits in landmark case. Corey Briskin and Nicholas Maggot Pinto says state's definition of infertility discriminate against same-sex couples. God. One, not only is this insane, but it's also just stupid. It's just stupid. Obviously, you're infertile. You're two men. You're two men. You don't have wombs. A former New York assistant district attorney and his husband on Thursday, quote unquote husband, because this isn't a marriage, this is an abomination. There's no such thing as same-sex marriage. There's only abominations. On Thursday, filed a class action lawsuit against New York City Mayor Adams, former Mayor Bill de Blasio, and other city leaders in a landmark case for the rights of gay men who want to conceive children in the U.S. You cannot conceive children without a woman. So if you are a homosexual and you have chosen that lifestyle, I hate to break this to you, but you have forfeited your right to have children. Because you are able to have children, but with a woman. See, that's the benefits of heterosexual relationships. You get to bring children into the world, but because you are opting out of that, you forfeit that right, and that's your problem. But it's not enough for them. They want to make it the problem of the state and of women. They want to fight for this imagined right for them to have children. You don't have a right to have children. Corey Briskin and Nicholas Maggot, 38, allege that New York's definition of infertility discriminates against same-sex male couples, violating federal and state civil rights laws. The lawsuit follows Briskin and Maggot, 2022, compliant to the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. If they succeed, they will set a legal precedent that defines all gay men infertile regardless of their medical history, and employers across the U.S. will be under pressure to offer the same fertility benefits to gay men as they do women and heterosexual couples. Briskin began working in the city of New York in 2017 after his abomination to Maggot, and both he and his spouse were entitled to health care coverage with the Emblem Health throughout the city's comprehensive benefits plan. When they began researching their reproductive options, why do you need to research your reproductive? We know how reproduction works. When a man lies with a woman, they conceive a baby. That's your option. That's it. There is no other option. That's it. And there should not be any other option. But damn it, they are fighting for one. When they began researching their reproductive options that year and read the wording of the emblem health policy, they discovered that gay men were the only class of people to be excluded from IVF coverage. They were not seeking the cost for the cost of surrogacy to be covered. The policy defines infertility as the inability to conceive a child after 12 months of unprotected heterosexual sex. Because guess what? Heterosexual couples are the only couples in the only relationship that can conceive children. There is no other relationship that can do that. We are not amoebas. We don't self-replicate. It's just an impossibility. So, or through intrauterine insemination. Straight people, lesbians, single women employed by New York City's government are therefore eligible for infertility benefits covering the cost of IVF, but the same-sex male couples can never qualify. Well, because they don't have wombs. So, that's obvious. No one can put a baby in their belly. They can't carry children. They just can't do it. It's a biological impossibility. Maggot and Briskin's complaint uses the reverse definition of infertility adopted by the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, which characterizes infertility as a disease, condition, or status which requires medical intervention, including donor gametes, to achieve a successful pregnancy. So if you have a medical condition which requires medical intervention that requires a donor, and you're advocating for this to be a law, this is going to require another person. And you want to know what you don't have the right to? Another human being. In a way, it's kind of like slavery. If they have this right, then they have the right then to women's wombs to have children, to carry their children, and then steal those children from those women. That sounds as Orwellian as it gets. That's crazy to me. That's even that could even be a possibility. I cannot believe I cannot believe that this is like, I hope for women's sake this case immediately gets thrown in the trash. And you know what was crazy to me? Feminists have been, they have this show called The Handmaid's Tale where men are using women as baby factories. I don't think they ever thought it was going to be the gay men that were doing it. Because in real life, most straight men are opposed to this. And I hope for those of you who have been on the fence of surrogacy, you're starting to identify the real problems with it. Because this is just one of them, as I talked about in a recent episode. The other thing is that this relationship by nature is denying a child of their right to have a mother and a father. And it's wholly separate from adoption because they are intentionally doing this. They are intentionally creating a scenario where a child does not have his mother and father. That's evil. That's wicked and cruel and should not be legal under any circumstances. So, yeah, that's wild to me. So my hope is that this case gets thrown in the trash and that the feminists start to wise up. You made men your enemies for so long, and now you have some men, just not the ones that you thought, that are literally coming for your bodies. They want to use you as baby making machines and then steal your baby. That is horrifying. And they're trying to make it a right. I hope you understand the gravity of this situation. And I hope you start to take it a little bit more seriously. because it could cost you everything. I know that was a pretty heavy episode. Man, that was heavy. I probably should add a lighter story in there, especially for a Friday. I do not like entering into the weekend on a down note. On a positive note, though, I am having a podcast or a space on X in probably about 20 minutes with some really great guys, and we're going to be talking about healthy masculinity, biblical masculinity versus worldly masculinity, and how good and decent men will stand in the gap of for women to protect them from evil men, like the man that you just saw, or the men you just saw, and the man that had his way with that woman in New York. And we need more men like that. And I want to encourage more men to be that way, to stand up for those who cannot stand for themselves, and challenge this insanity that we're seeing in the culture. And I think we will create a more healthy culture when we start to understand that masculinity, when channeled in the right way, can thwart evil and can build society and can change culture as we know it, especially if those men are filled with the Spirit and trust that God is going before them to fight their battles. And I firmly believe that. I've never believed that more than I do right now. I know that God fights my battles. I know that God stands in the gap for me. And because of that, I'm emboldened to speak out against these things. I don't care what it costs me. I will continue to use my voice, my platform, to attack evil and encourage men and women to be brave, to be bold, and to stand up for what is right, what is good, and what is beautiful, and against what is evil. So if you have time, join the space, because we got some cool guys in this space, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be a good conversation. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, comment, do all of those things, because that helps me grow. And thanks, Cly, for joining the chat. I appreciate you. You're one of the real ones, always showing up for me. You survived the audio issues, and you're still here. So I appreciate it. Hopefully, we're sounding good now too. I'm digging OBS. It gives me a little bit more freedom too, because I can play around with this chat and just do a lot more. So I have a lot more flexibility. So I'm stoked about this. So little bit of adjustments each video, and I plan to improve and just get better and better. So that is my plan, and I'm gonna do it. This whole year. I'm going hard, and I'm not gonna stop. Anyway, I appreciate you guys. I hope you have a blessed night, and happy Shabbat. Have a good one. Deuces.